Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Talk Books with Jill and Julie. My name is Jill Kenny, Head of Reader Services and Programming at the Chelmsford Public Library, and this is
Julie Itron, Reader's Advisory Specialist at the Chelmsford Public Library.
This is a new show where we highlight a few books that we'd like to share with you. Today we're going to talk about our top picks from 2023, and we each brought 3 today that we're going to highlight. It was really hard to pick only 3, but we managed to do it. So I'm going to let Julie highlight her first one. So let's hear what you got.
I'm going to kick us off with The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This was a book that I read in the second half of the year, and I really loved it. It's just such a gorgeous book. It's set in 1962 in a family that's going to cross from Nova Scotia to Maine. They're an indigenous family, part of the Mi'kmaq tribe, and essentially each year they travel from Nova Scotia to Maine to harvest blueberries on this land. And on one of the trips on a particular year, the whole family is together. Their youngest daughter, Ruthie, is 4, and their son, Joe, is with Ruthie. He's the last to see her when she disappears. So the family has to try to find Ruthie. They're unable to locate her. They have to return to Nova Scotia without their daughter, which is very tragic for them. And it kind of sets Joe into an emotional downslide. So he sort of moves through his life with the disappearance of Ruthie kind of hanging over his head. And at the same time, we're following a story of a young woman named Norma, who is a young girl in a white family who's being raised by kind of an overprotective mother. And I am not someone who necessarily loves a book that switches back and forth between characters, but you learn pretty quickly early on that these 2 characters are somehow connected. And essentially you as the reader figure it out before the characters figure it out. So as you move through the book, you're kind of rooting for them to find their way back to each other. But Norma essentially has these dreams that are very disturbing to her, and when she tries to talk about them with her mother gets ill and needs to take to bed. So Norma learns that she's not going to talk about these dreams. She keeps them, kind of hidden within. But as she grows older and she has sort of forgotten about the dreams, she moves through life and has these encounters, and essentially Joe and Norma are moving towards a point where they connect. And it's just this really beautiful story of found family. It's a story of how incidents in our lives shape our lives as we move forward. I really loved the traditions of the Mi'kmaq people that are woven through the whole book. It's just really an excellent, excellent read. I really feel like it's general fiction. I think anyone could read it and enjoy it, and I would definitely suggest picking up The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters.
Wow, sounds great. So it's a historical fiction.
Yeah, it's historical fiction, 1962. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, and local.
Yes, in Maine and then in Nova Scotia. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds great. I know it got a lot of good reviews this past year, too.
Yes, it
did. On a lot of lists.
Yes, this is a debut novel, too, by this author, so this was her first book.
Oh, so we have some, hopefully we'll get some more from her.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was good writing. Awesome. Great. Well, my first book that I'm going to talk about is called A Light in the Forest. This is by Melissa Payne. She has a few other novels that she's written. The last one that got a lot of attention was called The Night of Many Endings. It was also a thriller. This one is, this has a lot to unpack in this book. It's emotional, it's a suspense novel. There's a ton of secrets. There's a lot of triggers for people who have, well, let's say triggers. There's a lot of things that are brought up. So there's domestic abuse, trans, people of color. There's a lot of hate crime that happens in this. So if this is something that's difficult for you to read, it might be a tough book for you. Although because a lot of things are addressed, it was done really well. So it's a book it's definitely fictional. The premise is that there's a woman who, her past, she grew up moving around a lot with her mother. They lived in a trailer and they would always be changing places. Something would happen and they'd have to switch locations of where they're living. And she finds out as an adult that her mom was helping women who were in a domestic abuse situation. So she finds herself in a domestic abuse situation. She has a 2-month-old and she's gone down that path. Her mother dies and she finds a postcard that highlights this place that she remembers her talking about. And so she flees, she gets out of the situation, and she goes to this place in the postcard. It's a fictional town in Ohio. This is current, so it's not historical, but it's actually happening. It does flash back a little bit, but this town really becomes the next character in the book. There's so many different people in this town that help her. It becomes that situation where you're like, oh, the town is going to save her. But then you find out there's all these secrets in this town. And the reason why her mother was there is really part of the secret. She ends up finding out that she has major ties to this town. So it's fabulous. It literally grips you from the start to the end. It is a good ending. So it's not one that leaves you sad. So there are a lot of things that do happen that are tough, but it is fabulous. It's called A Light in the Forest. And if you want a book that you can't put down, this is your read.
So you said that it's historical fiction, but it almost sounds like it reads like a thriller? No?
No, it's a thriller. There are flashbacks, but
Okay.
it's really more contemporary fiction.
Contemporary fiction.
Yeah, it happens. Most of the novel is now. So,
Nice.
yeah, it's really good.
So fans of a thriller would like that one, you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, my next one is North Woods by Daniel Mason, and this is absolutely literary fiction. So I will recommend it highly with sort of the caveat that it's not a fast book. So it's really a gorgeous novel. It is a meander, if you will. So I think of this one as the perfect winter read. This is one you're going to want to snuggle up under the blankets with and have like a cozy cup of something to drink. This is really about location. So this is Mason's 5th novel, and it is essentially set in a yellow house that's deep in the woods in western Massachusetts, and the yellow house is like the protagonist of the story. So it starts with this yellow house, and then the book is about the succession of the occupants of this house, both human and otherwise. So it begins with a pair of young lovers who run away from their Puritan community to be able to live together in this house in the woods. And then we sort of move forward in time, and there's an anonymous woman who's writing a letter. And essentially, the book is written in its 12 chapters, one for each month of the year. And so it's a story of the land. And then in between the chapters are these really beautiful illustrations. So sometimes they're photographs, sometimes they're etchings, sometimes they are pieces of music. And it's been kind of, the nature descriptions in this book have been compared to like Walt Whitman and Nathaniel Hawthorne, but the characters are really amazing. I mean, there are ghosts that move in and out of the land, and the characters come forward and backwards in between each of the stories. So I actually feel like if you were a fan of Lincoln in the Bardo, that came out a few years ago, this would be another excellent recommendation for you. So North Woods by Daniel Mason.
Wow. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
So the location becomes a character as well,
Yes,
right? So,
yes,
wow.
yeah. Yeah, and all the characters that you learn about within the book are all connected and tied to the land and have a love of the land. So many of them don't want to leave, and so they don't. They stay forever and ever and ever. Yeah.
As some people do.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, that's a good segue into my next book, because this is another book where, I'll say the author, Fiona Davis, is a historical fiction author. This book is called The Spectacular. This is her newest book. All of her books, the location becomes a character. So the location is always in New York City, but it's always a landmark. So the landmark in this story is Radio City Music Hall. It's a combination. Well, the reason why it's historical fiction is because it's always a flashback story. So there's a current story and there's a flashback story. So this is 1956 is the main story, and they're talking about that, and then they flash to what's happening at 1956. This is when it's happening. Oh boy. So the main character, she's 19. She is a dancer, and she's really thinking this is going to be her path. So she's a ballet dancer, and she's teaching ballet. She finds that she is not the favorite, and she actually gets fired. And so this is not going to be her path, and she has to tell her parents that this is not working out. Her parents don't want her to dance anyway, so they're not sad about it, but they want her to marry this person who she's sort of an arranged marriage with her parents, and she does not love him, and so she sort of flees, goes to New York City, and stays in a woman's, it's a place where a lot of women that are single stay at that time, and there was a house mother, and
It's like a boarding house.
it's like a boarding house, thank you. And basically, this becomes her place that she stays. They get her an audition at Radio City Music Hall, and she's sort of a surprise last addition to the show. So it becomes this whole story of her trying to avoid her parents and the boyfriend, and he still wants to be with her because he thinks he needs to be. She gets involved with a man who is in the world of the spectacular Radio City Music Hall. So there's so much drama, but it's sort of lovely drama. It's nothing dramatic in the sense of no one is getting murdered and no one is, but there are, because the Radio City Music Hall is a character, there are things that are happening that are real. At that time, in 1956, this was the time of the Apple City bomber. And so, as the fiction part of it, the bomb goes off in Radio City, and things happen that they try to start solving the mystery, the main character does, and so it takes you down all these different paths of, does she become a dancer? Does she stay with that world? Does she go back with a boyfriend that the family wants her to be with? What does she do? So it was a very telling time of, mid-50s, women having to make these decisions for themselves or because their family wants them to do things. So it was awesome.
Is she
I loved
a
it.
Rockette in the book?
Yes.
Oh, she becomes a Rockette.
She becomes a Rockette.
Oh,
Yep.
so she went from being fired to essentially like getting the coveted role that all dancers have.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
getting paid to do it well.
And Fiona Davis is a very popular historical fiction writer.
Yes, she's actually one of my all-time favorite books she wrote is called The Masterpiece, and it takes place in Grand Central Station, and it follows to a woman who's currently working there, and then the history. There was an art school upstairs in Radio City, in Grand Central Station at the time. So it's fabulous. All of her, locations. There's one called the Dollhouse. There's one.
I don't think I've ever read Fiona Davis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, she's great. So I've read all of them.
Oh, all right. Well, I better add that to my list.
And this is the newest one called
Okay.
The Spectacular.
Great. All right, so now we're going to transition to my beloved Shark Heart by Emily Habeck. And this is another debut novel, and I know this is a mutual love for both of us.
Yes.
So essentially, this book is about two characters, Lewis and Wren. They've been married for only a few weeks when Lewis receives his diagnosis that he is going to become a great white shark. So in this book, the way that the world works is that there are some people who are just regular people like you and me, and then there are some people who have a genetic mutation that will turn them into some kind of animal. And there's all different mutations. So there's like birds and kimono dragons and, great white sharks. And great white sharks are, I guess, one of the worst diagnoses that you can get, in the sense that Lewis's transition is going to be very quick, and it's going to require a lot of effort on Wren's part. And the story is really about what does it mean to love someone when you know that you will not be able to be with them forever. So what does love look like when you have this limited time frame? So, similar to like a cancer diagnosis. I think the thing that was so great about this book is that the author is very matter of fact about this diagnosis. So it doesn't really faze you at all. Like, as you're reading the book, you think, yeah, okay, he's going to be a great white shark. Like, we just accept it, even though it sounds kind of fantastical. And I wouldn't say that it's science fiction at all, but I think because the author presents it in this matter of fact way. But if you kind of pause and think about it, it is wild. I mean, essentially, there's a part in the book where they have to set up a swimming pool in the backyard because he's too big for the house, but he's not quite ready to be released into the ocean. And then the other piece of it is that Wren is going to have to release him herself, because that's how it works in this world, is that if you have this mutation, your family is responsible for helping you sort of make that transition, or the government does it for you. And the book doesn't ever say what the government does, but it kind of hints that you don't necessarily want the government to be the one making this. So, Wren is going to have to make this difficult transition where she's going to let her husband go, and he's going to go and live an entirely different life without her. And it's preparing for that moment, and then also following after that moment. I mean, I think some of the best parts in the book are when Lewis is actually in the ocean as a great white shark, and what he remembers, and what his life is like, and then what Wren's life is like now that he's gone. So Shark Heart is just absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend it. I also like to mention, too, that this book here, if you have a library copy, you won't be able to feel it, but the front of the book is textured and the back of the book is textured like shark skin. So if you rub your hands over it, you'll feel like that shark skin feeling, which I think is really neat.
Yeah, that's so different.
Yeah. What was your favorite part of this book? Because I know you loved this one too.
I did too, yeah. I agree that it just is.
Yes.
It's just, all of a sudden you're reading, you're like, oh, this is just normal.
Right,
Like,
this is how
everyone
the world works.
accepts that this happens. And I think there was a part where all of a sudden they had to put him in the bathtub and with salt, and the description of his body changing into the almost gelatinous
Oh, the cartilage.
cartilage,
Yes.
and how freeing it felt to him, and how strange it was for Wren to touch it and feel it, and sort of that transition was so strange. I have an amazing fear of great white sharks, so I did not want to read this for the longest time. And then once I did, it was so not like that. It's obviously not about attacks or anything like that.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I agree. It was fabulous, and all of the reviews that I've read about it, everyone has that sort of, after you finish it, you think, I loved this book, and it's really hard to describe why.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I finished it and then hugged it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to sort of then explain it to someone else. I mean, the premise is essentially the main character is going to become a shark.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people will think, why would I want to read that?
Right, right.
So.
Yeah. But you definitely should read it because
Yeah.
it's so good.
It's really, it's quite beautiful. The
Yes,
way that it's...
the language is beautiful, and when you read it, especially if you can read it in hardcover, Lewis is an actor, and so some of the chapters are almost in like script style. Some of them are almost in poetry. I found that to be an excellent aspect of the book,
Right.
as well.
Yeah. Put that one on your list for sure. That's a great one. All right, my last book is so different from anything else we've talked about today. It's called Cutting Teeth. And if you can see from the cover, there's a white picket fence with some coloration on there that looks sort of bloody, which is a good hint. This is this is a great book. It is one that is totally unexpected. It's a great example of like running with an idea. So if you're in a writing class and someone said, okay, take, the shape of this table and turn it into a wild book, this is the book. So the the idea is that kids bite. There are kids that just bite, right? So this is a little preschool. There are 4-year-olds. This is parenting challenges. There are expectations, friendships, but it's really much more about motherhood and the lengths that mothers go to be there for their children. So New York Times described this as a witty, thrilling story of parental love that asks, is there anything a mother won't do for her children? So there are 3 moms that basically are so different. They're friends, but these children start to bite, but they don't just stop with biting. They start to need blood. So it is a little, the whole time you're reading it, you're thinking, is this a vampire book? What's happening? So this starts to go down that path, and then the teacher dies. The teacher is murdered. These little 4-year-old kids are the suspects. It becomes this crazy crime scene, and this whole story of trying to figure out, did one of these little kids, or all of them, take down this teacher and murder her? Or were the mothers involved? Then it becomes this great drama, and it goes back and forth. I'm not obviously going to tell you the ending because that's the best part of the story, but Chandler Baker is the author, and she is the author of The Whisper Network.
I'm not familiar with that.
And The Husbands is another one. The
I
Whisper
have heard of The
Network.
Husbands.
Yep, The Whisper Network is, I should say all of her books are sort of women empowerment, sort of thriller on a feminist level. So Cutting Teeth is one of those books, but The Whisper Network really talks about women in corporate America, and it's sort of a Big Little Lies kind of things happen that they can't explain, and it's great. So thriller, lots of questions that you have to add this to your list and start reading to find out the answers on this one. So,
do you find yourself rooting for the mothers?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So is it written from their perspectives at points too? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I should mention that the fathers are not absent. They are in the story. They are participants, some of them. They are supportive and not supportive. So it's a crazy PTO kind of situation.
Yeah.
And
So
one
they're
of the
unreliable
scenes,
narrators in some cases, right?
yes, because they're questioning what's happening with their own children half
Right.
the time too. So they're not sure if this is really a disease or if this is going to last forever.
Environmental.
Environmental. It's pretty wild. It's great. So it's a great one. I really liked it a lot.
Good.
So, yeah. Well, I think that's the time we have for today. We hope that you've enjoyed our episode of the top picks, or say our top picks of 2023. Like I said, it was very difficult to only choose 3. I think we each had brought a few extras just in case we had more time to talk about them. And we want to thank you for joining us, and we hope that you will check us out next time.